All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives 2 and McDuff on Facebook. It's great to have you with us and really excited about getting together with David Cranmer Underdown and Mark Kulacz of Who Satanic Live. And we are constituting our little Wednesday night trio for tonight. And boy, there's a lot of interesting things that have happened since I've been on vacation. But I've been watching the Twitter feed from David and watching the shows from Mark, and I'm ready to get caught up myself. So, good evening, gentlemen. How are you both doing?
I'm doing great. I had a nice long talk with Mark the other day, so it was a really good conversation, and we'll hopefully be able to hit on some of the highlights with you tonight.
Doing great. Research continues. Had a great week last week with Dr. Jonathan Cooey of Gigahome Biological. My voice is a little sore. Just had a long 4-hour interview with a family that has experienced loss from the big R, the REM. But we won't say any more, but that's where my mind is at right now. So I was hoping to have a few more show notes ready. Nonetheless, I think between David and I, it's going to come out. We're going to have, I think there's a lot to an entertaining show tonight. How would you describe it, David? Like what topic would you say is going to anchor it?
Well, I think that, we've been talking a lot about the Sagan family and the Indiana, and we've talked a lot about Terre Haute. And John had a question on my Twitter the other day of whether we should take nuclear action towards Terre Haute, Indiana. And I'm going to try to be honest about all of the problems of Terre Haute, but also defend the fact that my grandma was a student there and my uncle Jerry was grew up there, and that it should be picked over, not wiped off.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you that because I'll defer to your grandmother on that one. I mean, everybody loves their grandmother. But this is a good time for me to make a point that folks that are new to our work here, or even if you've been watching for a while, I think you understand what I'm going to say. But what's important to understand here is Mark, David, none of us have all the answers. But what you're seeing here is the ongoing, unfolding process of our research as it develops. And everybody that's involved in this is researching, and we're trying to uncover things. And so you will hear speculation from time to time in our stuff. And don't expect us to talk like college professors telling you the way it is. If that's what you're looking for, you're not going to find it here, because we are not acting like authorities in ivory towers. Quite the contrary. We're the ones at the bottom of the tower shouting up saying, hey, can you explain this, please? We need to understand this. And the people up in the ivory towers are like saying, we don't need to tell them peasants nothing, but no, the peasants are angry. We got our pitchforks out, and I'm ready to start shaking the tower. How about you, David?
I've been ready to shake it for a while. I mean, I'm, as you guys know about me, I mean, I'm somebody that's just really been hurt by what's happened to my own family, and who's credible and who to believe. And of course, like, doing this work is heartbreaking, because it is, you want to think that, the medical professionals, the people that are creating health policy for our country, for our states, for our communities, for the world, is simple. They want good health for people. They want people to be as healthy as possible, and if they get sick, to be treated and not to be suspect. But and especially to use, as we've talked about a lot, to use the Atomic Energy Commission, Department of Energy, to use these secret programs that they've been running for 70 years now, and to use that level of secrecy to hide it it's hard, because again, it's gone on so long. I try to talk to my dad about this stuff, and he always just, his response is what you'd expect. If this was true, you would hear about this on the news. You would hear about this on the mainstream news. They would talk about this of these characters, and it's like, well, you have to look at who created the the information that's given to us, and it's all the same, intelligence networks. It's just a different branch, the information department. But it's hard for me because, again, like, I feel like with what we've all gone through personally, as far as trying to really figure out what's happening and talking about different characters. It's just hard because they have they have obvious intelligent asset people that they can use to either discredit you personally or just try to hurt your message, or just just distract you and try to take your time, frustrate you, and sort of break you down, your confidence down or whatnot. But it is hard. And as we talked about with Mark, with a lot of these programs, sadly, like the places that I grew up and the people I was around, I feel like they were part of it. And it makes it hard for me because my direct family never talked to me like this about this stuff. But as we've said, Herman Muller was the neighbor of my mom in Bloomington, Indiana. So it's like, so it's hard to believe. but
It's hard to believe.
It's hard to believe, but at the same time, I'm also open-minded to know that the person that was the president of Indiana University was recruited to go to Stanford to be their first president, and he was one of the leading minds in the world as far as running these eugenic programs, and his name was David Starr Jordan. And that was somebody that was one of the founders of the Bohemian Club. He was the first president of Stanford. I mean, but he came from Bloomington. He was the president of Indiana, and he went out to Palo Alto. So, we talk now. I mean, we're into Matt Pottinger being this, suspected mole within the Trump campaign, giving, medical advice as a national security advisor. His current position is at the Hoover Institute at Stanford. So it's not like these things aren't unrelated.
Pottinger is a name that was not on my radar screen when I left the country back on August, whatever it was, the 10th or so. And you guys have been talking about generations of Pottingers. Maybe if you could just fill me in on the Pottinger legacy, and what did you mean by saying he was a mole in the Trump administration? I think I know what you mean, but let's hear it from you, David. Go ahead.
Well, George Webb has been talking a lot about the FBI, raid on the Mar-a-Lago, and sort of the basis for that, the legality of searching a former president and all these things. So Matt Pottinger is a character that was he was the assistant national security advisor, and he was originally brought in by Michael Flynn, who people remember from the early days of the Trump administration, having to resign for the perjury, or for misspeaking to an FBI agent. But they go back to the Afghan war, and they work together on. I'm not sure exactly. I can't remember exactly what the paper they wrote, but they have a long history. And of course, Mark had done he had done a lot of work on the outbreak in 2004 in Hong Kong with the unforgettable hard driving businessman Johnny Chen, and the I forget the name of the other doctor that was across the hall from him that was the very first victim. But Matt Pottinger was a Wall Street Journal reporter at that point, and he was somebody that was the first person to sort of break this outbreak in 2004. So he has sort of this intriguing history. And then, of course, his father has an equally intriguing history, because his dad was somebody that worked for the Department of Justice during the Nixon administration, but also more specifically, he was in the Health, Education, and Welfare Department, which was the predecessor of the Department of Health before they changed it to the NIH. The department was called the HEW, Health, Education, and Welfare. So that was the department he worked in, his dad. And of course, his dad then has the intrigue of being the only person that knows the identity of Deep Throat, which of course, this was all before my time. But of course, that was like the big intrigue. And of course, there was a girl that I used to ski against whose dad was supposedly the Hugh Sloan that was one of the good guys that was talking with Woodward. And there's always the Cranbrook intrigue in there. But again, it's Danny Ellsberg was a Cranbrook alumni. So, it's not in, Mitt Romney is a Cranbrook alumni. So there are characters there. But as far as like circling back to Pottinger, the long history is that Henry Pottinger, who we're not sure if he's related. I mean, we assume he is based on his history. He was a British lord that was the person that negotiated the ending of the very first Opium War. So he was the person that signed the document that made Hong Kong an independent outpost for the East India Company. And so that was his role. And then the other Pottinger that's very intriguing is a British PR firm called Bell Pottinger. And they have the intrigue of doing public relations work with a family called the Gupta family in South Africa. And this Gupta family was accused of doing what they called a state capture. But the other person that was a client was Anton Rupert. And Anton Rupert was the South African businessman that was partners with Prince Bernard, the Dutch prince, in creating the World Wildlife Fund 1001 partners. So that it has this legacy network. And of course, when you get into the World Wildlife Fund, you also have Julian Huxley as one of the 7 founders of it. And Julian Huxley was the man that hired Hermann Muller to go to Rice University to start their bio program.
Well, that's quite a great connection there. And back to Hermann Muller, the neighbor of your mother, and he is the author of the paper that you published, Mark, on your on one of your recent shows on Housatonic Live, in which he basically said what you just told us, that he felt that we had not only to improve the genome generally, but also to reduce the population in a drastic way, and that's where it all comes up to Prince Philip and the crazy royals that I've been talking about for so long. Before we get too far into depth on that, though, one of your other big points that you've made recently, Mark, is about the importance of looking beyond Anthony Fauci, and I see what you're saying. In other words, they're getting ready to throw Fauci under the bus, right? I mean,
at the very least, he's retiring, but he might be thrown under the bus while they're at it. Yeah.
And then there's also an attempt. I've noticed that they're going to start trying to blame Trump for the ineffective response to the COVID crisis. So, yeah, I can blame him for allowing people like Birx and Fauci and Collins to have control over the policy. But the policy itself didn't come from Trump. And that's a political issue that I guess is always going to be with us. But I don't know what's going to happen in the next election, by the way. It's very interesting. But the people have been so bamboozled and fooled. But okay, so beyond Fauci, the next name that you are focusing on is Joshua Lederberg. And I think it's important that everybody join you in this and in saying, okay, beyond Fauci, and then that's the next layer, might be Lederberg. There's layers behind that. But if we're going to try to peel away all the layers so that the American people can use the sunshine law and disinfect this crazy medical system. We have to go layer at a time. So I know you've talked a lot about it on your own show, but just for people that haven't heard your show yet, give us a summary of what you found.
Anthony Fauci has been in charge of the National Institutes of Allergies and Infectious Diseases, the NIAID, for over 40 years. He was in a deputy type role of the department as of like 1980, and 81, 82, he was running it, and he's been running that department ever since, which is there's very few roles, especially a director, where you can have that type of tenure, 40 plus years. The scorn which is put upon Fauci over the decisions which have been made about how HIV and AIDS crisis was handled, about how new therapies have been expedited for the current pandemic, about how, and most people have not caught up with me on this, how the Spanish flu is being misrepresented and misused to promote policy. Unfortunately, a lot of that, for people who are critical of the system, they put it squarely on Fauci. Not necessarily your audience or my audience, but many do. And it limits it to thinking that, well, things were more or less hokey dokey. And then this evil guy came along that wanted to make some money, selling AZT or something like that. And it's a very simpleton narrative, and it just severs one person off from the whole machine. And now when that person goes to retire, you can just kind of take all that blame and just ignore the past. But even when Fauci was appointed into this role, which was a long time ago, 40 plus years, this machine already had a significant amount of momentum, decades of momentum. He was found because he was the right guy for the job. Take away, the feelings that we feel compelled to have over someone who can be so snarky and can laugh at things which are happening, which result in the loss of so many lives from time to time, and to just let go of that. It's hard to do, but he was the perfect guy for the job. He kept himself in shape. He was able to do it consistently for 40 something years. He always said exactly. Okay, there was that. Maybe he just jogged so much that morning, and he was just tired and a little dehydrated. I don't know. That's a good point, though. And he did. I'm not saying I respect it about what he did, but I can respect that he did what what he was asked to do. And I'm not sure how in control of this whole machine he ever really was. The Robert F. Kennedy book seems to suggest that he was the guy on top, and I don't think he was. I don't think he is. And it's obvious that it should not be considered that if he was brought into the role to fulfill a certain job. And that job was to, advance the research of genetics through jabinations, possibly even play into some of the continued population control aspects of it. And so where was he brought in? Well, he started off, he got his education at Cornell. Cornell had some of their classes and early student programs in New York City, much of it within the confines of Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital, the very first cancer research hospital in the world that actually got its funding 36 hours after Hiroshima. Most people don't know that. It's just one of those odd little data points. I know it had to be funded at some point, but that's just one of those very, very strange data points. And it speaks to how entangled cancer, virus, in particular vaccine research is with the study of radiation, atomic energy, and weapons of mass destruction, in particular, atomic weapons of mass destruction. So this machine has been going a long time. Fauci's father was working as a pharmacist director at Memorial Sloan Kettering, going back to at least the 1960s. I'm assuming 1950s. And he was brought in by other people who were senior to him, such as, for example, the first director overall was a Dr. Ewing, but the person who ran the whole study of vaccinology was a Cornelius P. Rhodes, who was a high-ranking military medical officer. I think he reached the title of corporal. And he, during World War II, again, was brought into the atomic energy, the research associated with the Manhattan Project, which then was turned over to become the Atomic Energy Commission, or the AEC. And he was studying the effects of radiation on cancers. How much radiation causes how much cancer, what type of cancer, how much distance do you need to be? And it wasn't really because they needed to know, can you eat the lamb if it's 1 mile or 2 miles away from the atomic blast? I mean, that's the kind of stuff they would justify it. But in reality, it's a study of cancers. And a study of cancers is a study of what turned out to be genetics. And the belief, going back to Hermann Muller, and this been shown to be somewhat untrue, was that you can cause and you can actually steer genetic changes with radiation. And that's what Muller had been studying going back to the 1920s and 1930s. Hence, you have this continuum, and it never stopped. It never stopped. Joshua Lederberg, who I keep bringing up, was essentially the biowarfare genetics version of Henry Kissinger. Lederberg provided consultation to 7 U.S. presidents, almost as many as Kissinger, and in fact, it would have been almost as many if Lederberg didn't die of essentially old age in 2008. It was. Lederberg discovered the role of virus.
Too bad it was too early to call it a COVID case.
Good point. Although, I think he would have. I wonder what he would have done. Would he have gotten the jab? I don't know. That's a good question.
All right, we're on thin ice here.
But he started off at a very young age, one of the youngest Nobel Prize winners of all time, studying the role of viruses and conjugation, or the sharing of genes amongst single-cell organisms, which was bacteria, which really, one thing leads to the next, and it opens up the door of viruses maybe not necessarily being pathogens. They're real, but sometimes they can be correlated with disease, and sometimes they're correlated with things relative to reproduction, or actually the immune system functioning properly. The documents written by Lederberg and by other people at Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital in New York City in the 1950s, they were taking things which they thought were viruses, based upon electron microscopy and filtering and so on, and taking viruses from animals, injecting into human tumors, taking cancers from viruses from humans, injecting into animals, seeing if they can cause or cure tumors, cancers, with these microscopic parasites or pathogens, if you will. And then things were often and running at that time, combined with the possibilities that Hermann Muller was laying out, the impact of radiation. They really thought that they were in the early days of determining how mechanically our chromosomes work, and how to impact it, how to damage it as a weapon, or how to improve it. And Hermann J. Muller and many others, it wasn't just his own idea. They had two things. We need to control the population, and that was actually the easy part. That was the realizable one. The other part is we need to improve the population. And improving an existing person is very hard. We're very complex, multicellular organisms. You can't just change one person's DNA because you got billions of cells. Where do you start?
But I saw an ad on TV that said if I take these pills, I'd be a lot smarter. So I could do that, right? I mean, I could take the pills and then I'd, be a whole lot smarter.
Well, advertisements never lie, do they, John? So Lederberg it's an extensive history. He worked with all the top diplomats. He had a working relationship with Fauci. He was when Kissinger was missing from a security meeting, Lederberg was usually missing as well. Lederberg was the person that was specifically picked by Rumsfeld after 9/11 to research the anthrax attacks. I mean, I don't know how much high ranking you can get in a role. He was the only bacteriologist involved in all of the future security working groups under Reagan, determining the future of warfare and national security in the future. He was the person that NASA used to outline the risks of spacecraft returning from space and microbial life from the great beyond.
That one makes me laugh. I mean, that sounds like one of those things which you just talked about, how right after Hiroshima they authorized opened what was it, a study on nuclear.
Well, after it was the funding came in from Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital, from Sloan and Kettering.
Yeah, it's the military industrial medical complex, but the idea that suddenly the biggest concern on Joshua Lederberg's plate is, what if some microbes from space can get into our atmosphere? I mean, first of all, space is supposed to be a vacuum, right? And I mean, if there's a microbe up there, that means there's life beyond the planet Earth, which hasn't been proven yet anyway. And it's just so, it seems like such a speculation that it has an ulterior motive. If I'm right, and if there is an ulterior motive, what do you think it might be, Mark?
Well, it sounds like a cover to get more money and to be able to subject people to more types of medical experimentation, and because we're protecting the humans from space contamination. Although when you're doing something that has never been done before, I mean, I don't think anyone's objects to the possibility or to the spending some money to be sure that there's no biological contamination. Okay. However, when you see the Photoshop are using Airstream campers as their decontamination units, the big shiny buffed aluminum systems, you're like, man, I think Airstream was just doing that to sell some more campers. And of course, provide cover for more money, and maybe even keep some of the space program classified, saying, oh, you know what, there could be super germs coming back that could be used to make weapons of mass destruction. So we can't tell everyone exactly what's going on with our space program. We need to protect people. It could have been that as well. I've kept the door open on Lederberg for a long time, but it hits home a little bit because he took a lot of money from the Sackler family in the 1990s to fund his labs. And there are some pictures of him with the Sackler family looking very, very cozy. So, and the Sacklers have taken hundreds of thousands of people with their synthetic opioids. So again, there's another check in the box, another box checked right there, So I think I've run out of rope for Lederberg in my research. I still hope for the best. Maybe he was thinking all this stuff is going to happen anyways, and I'm just going to make the best of it. But I don't think that's the case. Anyways, David, well, your turn.
I'm going to get David to clean this up, because I'm going to ask David the ultimate question is, who is really behind, Fauci, Lederberg, the Cornelius P. Rhodes, our favorite correspondent from the Puerto Rico event, and the idea of Rockefeller medicine entirely. It seems to me, that's where we got to look, is to the incredible power of the Rockefeller foundations, the Carnegie and Ford foundations, and the people behind that. But can you be more specific? Can you help us out with something that carries us beyond what Mark just was able to give us?
Just don't forget, Lederberg was the president of the Rockefeller Foundation for like 12 years. 1980 to 1992. He is in it. I didn't mean to take your thunder on that, David, but that's fine. A great lead-in.
I didn't know that, but all this stuff. I mean, my instincts are like, okay, Rhodes is a Rockefeller guy. Thomas Milton Rivers is a Rockefeller guy. All of these, everybody that talks about these viruses and then gets the big grant money, they're Rockefeller guys. David,
They had to be, though. I mean, I think that you have the Flexner report, which was Simon Flexner, who was his background was John Hopkins. He basically created a paper for the Carnegie Foundation that dictated what the new standards would be for medical schools, and that was applied throughout our country. And then his brother Abraham Flexner was the director of the Rockefeller University. So you've got two brothers, one in Carnegie, one in Rockefeller. So again, it's like these things are pinned together. They're separate. They have their own programs, they have their own staffs, but I think there's a lot of common oversight, as you've alluded to. One of the other things I think is incredible is that with Cornelius Rhodes, his letter that he wrote about his views on the Puerto Rican people was the inspiration for an assassination attempt of Harry Truman. I mean, I don't know if people remember that.
No, I didn't know that.
Harry Truman.
I didn't know that either. Awesome.
Yeah. So Harry Truman was in West Executive Avenue, and two Puerto Rican men that had heard this reports of Cornelius Rhodes's letter that he wrote shot and killed, I think, one of the only Secret Service men to ever be killed in the line of duty was on West Exec Avenue. And of course, for me, I'm like, are they just literally sticking it in our face? I mean, that is the name of Anthony Blinken's consulting firm, is West Exec, named after West Executive Avenue. So again, are they just literally just going to be like my father-in-law's, what's his name? I'm blanking on Robert Maxwell's or Samuel Pisner. Robert Maxwell's attorney for his entire career. My dad is worked at Warburg Pincus, was one of the founding partners. That's the company that staked Kissinger and Associates, and he started the Open Society Library in Budapest, Hungary, which was started by George Soros, which was originally the archives of the Voice of America and Radio Free Europe, which was started by Alan Dulles. So are they literally just clowning everybody and just saying we just don't even care? We're gonna, name our stuff just to, because nobody will figure it out. Now, the person I also want to talk about that I think is really important, but Mark's talked a ton about, is Miss Peggy Hamburg, because Peggy was one of the people at the Michael Milken Institute conference where they talked about, we got to make our medicine sexy. We can't have old-fashioned egg medicine, chicken or the egg question. We need sexy mRNA. We need to get it hot. So you've got your Rick Bright, you've got Peggy Hamburg. Peggy is, of course, on the very influential Nuclear Threat Initiative, which features Ted Turner, one of our favorite characters historically, but also Henry Kissinger, one of the founders, William Perry, not Refrigerator Perry from the '85 Chicago Bears, but William Perry, the Department of Defense head. It features Sam Nunn, another one of our favorite characters, who wrote the Nunn and Lugar Act, which I believe Joshua Lederberg was influential in that one with David Hamburg. But then, of course... Who is David Hamburg? The father of Peggy, of course. I know, this is for John and the audience. No, yeah. I'm saving the best for John for last. Of course, George P. Shultz is also one of the Nuclear Threat Initiative founders. Now, one of the things I didn't know until this week was that Tyler Shultz, the grandson of George P. Shultz, was the hero whistleblower in the Thermanos case. And, I mean, so we're talking about our buddy Stan Pottinger. well, who was the lawyer for Elizabeth Holmes and Thurmanos? It was David Bose. And who was David Bose? Oh, he was at Bose, Schiller and Flexner. Now, I haven't checked if the Flexner is the same Flexner, but I do know that the Bose, he was the lawyer in not only the Westmoreland versus CBS case, which was a very big deal because most people don't know who Westmoreland was. I know because he knows a lot about the Phoenix program, but he was the lawyer for that. He was also the lawyer for the Gore versus Bush hanging Chad situation. And he's also happens to be the Harvey Weinstein, of course. But then he also is the person in charge of collecting the Epstein Survivor Fund money with Stan Pottinger, the Deep Throat guy, the dad of Matt. So it's kind of like a lot of familiar faces. And then you also have to throw in with the Nuclear Threat Initiative, who was the person from the Nuclear Threat Initiative that staked the initial low enriched uranium fuel bank in Kazakhstan. It was Warren Buffett, our buddy. Warren.
That's right.
Humanitarian, giving, that's helping control the threat of nuclear material, getting it out of the hands of terrorists. So these, there's a lot of good deeds.
Good deeds, indeed.
So what David alluded to was Margaret Hamburg, or Peggy Hamburg, she was on that Milken panel. She was also the director at the Nuclear Threat Initiative, the NTI, that oversaw the monkeypox exercises in 2021. One of the WebEx calls for that leaked, and I think I caught it on YouTube and I posted a copy. It's very, very entertaining to go over that.
I got this image of a monkeypox trial, and all the monkeys are running around in my head.
What is it with them? They run the simulation using you have to use a date on the calendar, and they chose the same date that monkeypox actually happened. Again, just like Event 2-1. Like, come on. Anyways,
It's like the Simpsons. I mean, they're just like saying, we're so. Here's the model that I've always thought of is a bunch of really intelligent guru type people sitting around a table saying, well, should we do this? If they're too stupid to figure it out, then yeah, we can do it. Okay. So then they tell us all the clues in the world, here's what we're going to do right down to the very day. And we still don't react. And then they say, well, you see, these people are just stupid. I mean, these are useless eaters. So go ahead, pull the lever, push the button, let the guys, tell the guys the game's on. And boom, you have your next event. That's my model.
I think that's possible. It's like, it just feels like trolling, just to make people mad. And what's anyone going to do about it? Call the Attorney General?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, come on. That's going to happen. Well, all we can do is, approach it with style and class and respect and support each other through this. And I tell you what, that's what drives this permanent government crazy. When people don't lose their cool, and they're trying. They want people to get mad, and just do irrational things. And when they're not, it's I think it's hard. It's hard on them. I think they're jealous in a way. So, Mark,
the types that would fly off of the handle and so whack, throw a punch right away.
Perhaps
we've been through a lot, and we're still here, and that means we've had to learn some lessons, and we've all got some scars. We've taken some hits. Have Mark and David and I have talked about these things. It hits us all personally, but we rise above it and we keep on doing our work. And, that's it. It is personal. It's deeply personal. If it wasn't, I don't think I'd be so motivated as I am. But, when David mentions George P. Schultz, people that haven't been with me for long don't realize that my dad and George P. Schultz were like rivals on the athletic field at Loomis Chaffee Institute in Hartford, in Windsor, Connecticut, when they were doing their prep school years, and then went in different directions. And from that day until today, I think that they went in completely different directions. George P. Shultz has been an influence on this country in a very, very bad way. I would class him right up there with Fauci myself, because I don't give Fauci any slack at all. I think he's well, you know what I mean. And the same thing with Shultz. So, in terms of McDuff and McDuff Lives and his mission, when I find something that I can expose that has to do with George P. Shultz, I appreciate it. And because he is the opposite. He's the nemesis or the opposite, the foil of the McDuff character in American history. And speaking of American history, there's another Flexner brother that wrote a biography of George Washington, which is a very famous, important biography of Washington. And I think he was a brother. To think of the context of that, where you have a Flexner covering, the history of this country, as well as, one doing the medicine and one doing the politics, and that it sure does look like a conspiracy.
I want to add one more thing with George Shultz, as long as we're piling on. He was also a board of director of Gilead Sciences with Donald Rumsfeld, but also with one of my characters that I always like to focus on is Bino Schmidt. Bino Schmidt was the first head of the war on cancer. And of course, as we've all talked about, there's a lot of personal scars from cancer for people in this group. And Bino Schmidt is one of those people that came from a finance background at J.M. Whitney, with Jock Whitney was his partner, but then he transitioned into the war on cancer under the Nixon administration. And then he was recruited later to be one of the directors of Gilead Sciences. And I know Mark knows a lot about Gilead from its technical standpoint. And of course, Donald Rumsfeld is intriguing based on his 9/11 work of, going through the rubble at the Pentagon. And then, even more interestingly, being I believe, the final authority on the Iraq study group that was overseeing the reconstruction of Iraq. I believe that Donald Rumsfeld was the final authority on that report.
I think he might know where the true $2.3 trillion is too, don't you, Mark?
Oh, I remember when $2 trillion was a lot of money. I'm that old. Going back to Margaret Hamburg, and it ties in a couple of things which have been discussed. She was the director of the Food and Drug Administration for 7 years under President Obama. Her mission, she stated her mission on the very first day that she was inaugurated, was to advance and usher in the era of personalized medicine. That was her. She was clear as day about it, which means genetic medicine, a whole new era of medicine monitoring, eugenics, or I should say epigenetics, etc. She was in Congress a month before September 11th, 2001, next to Sam Nunn and Jerome Hauer, talking about the risk of a large bioterrorism event in a major U.S. metropolitan center. Because she was an emergency response director. I don't have the title a little bit wrong, for Giuliani in the mid-90s. Margaret Hamburg was a very young age, a director of AIDS trials for Fauci in New York City. But most importantly is that her father is David Hamburg, which is a name that I think I honestly never even heard of. Shame on me, perhaps, but for most people. And David Hamburg was the person who worked directly with the Russian premiers or presidents in the 1980s to kick off nuclear disarmament. He was the person who inspired the Nulln-Lugar program. He was the president of the Carnegie Institute from 1980 to 1993, and he was the best friend of Joshua Lederberg. Matter of fact, Joshua Lederberg wrote the referral letter to Duke University for his best friend's daughter, Margaret Hamburg. When Joshua Lederberg shows up on the Charlie Rose show, he sits across the table from Margaret Hamburg. So that's a very tight trio. And again, well, unfortunately, and this is what I love about this group and other groups that I associate with, while the other channels are talking about angry, they're angry, John. They're just not getting anywhere. They're talking about off the cuff, completely unproven conspiracies. They're angry, right? And I think we're being productive, we're being controlled, and we're trying to get the bigger picture here. It's way beyond Fauci. Fauci will be gone, and unless people talk about more than just Fauci, nothing's going to change. And as a matter of fact, almost all of this horror happened, probably would have happened if Fauci never even existed, matter of fact. Although I do wonder, given the fact that more deputies have died suspiciously for Fauci than anyone else in U.S. government history, I do wonder, is that really, does he have something to do with that? Or is someone overlooking his well-being? I don't know. I'm still on the fence about that. Nonetheless, being 1 degree, 2 degrees from Anthony Fauci and in disagreement is a place that is comes with health risks, to say the least.
Can you imagine, though? I mean, these are all very, very intelligent people, but I think that they somehow get themselves into a frame of mind, especially if they're Catholic or Knights of Malta, that or if they're, involved in some of the upper level Catholic societies, especially the Knights of Malta, that because the Knights of Malta in America was kind of created to populate the intelligence services and the executive departments with people who would be friendly to the religious authorities, such as the Jesuits and the Pope. And so many of these guys that are doing things, from William Donovan of the OSS to a lot of the people like I can't like McCone, or even look at Podesta and all of the other ones that it appears to me that somehow they have adopted the idea that even though they're doing something that's really, really evil, that they're doing it for a good cause. And the good cause has been, that this is what the Pope wants, or this is what my local religious authority wants, and they know God better than I do, so I'm going to do what they think is best, even if it involves, something as horrible as genocide, which we've seen so much of in the past couple of centuries. So I know it's hard to believe that people can just plain be that evil, but one of the factors is that humanity has always had religions for the past couple thousand years, and some of us are really, really so attached to our religion that we believe that hey, if the Pope says who will rid me of this ban, I'm supposed to volunteer. Anyway, that's just me. What do you think, David?
Well, I always think that it's, there are multiple angles. I think certainly the religious and spirituality is really an important factor historically and in contemporary times. But I also look at, just facts like Peggy Hamburg's husband is named Peter Brown, and he is the director of a company called Renaissance Technologies. And the founder of Renaissance Technologies is an interesting person. It's Jamie Simons. He happened to be the mentor of Jeff Epstein, is one sidebar, but he also hired both Peter Brown and Robert Mercer. Now, Robert Mercer is somebody that historically is a really important sort of conservative philanthropist, but he also was just deep in the mix with the Cambridge Analytica, with the SCL group. And then it became called the Emmer Data. And those groups were all partnered with Eric Prince and the Frontier Services Group. And my suspicion, I can't prove it, but Bell Pottinger they dissolved in, I think, 2016. And what I think happened was, I think that this Cambridge Analytica SCL group sort of took the reins of that, becoming this major force in using, military intelligence and persuasion techniques. They say, they're trying to drive public opinion. But, so they have, like you said, they have, like you were talking about with the Flexners, they've got one brother that's the politician, one that's the doctor, one that's the author and the scholar. And I do think that they, cover every base. But, again, it's the other thing with like Renaissance technology, it's right next to Stony Brook, which is in, Long Island. That was a Nelson Rockefeller founded school. They're partners with the Brookhaven National Lab. They're sponsored by Battelle and the Department of Energy, and sort of all these other areas that we cover. And I know that with Mark personally, he really focuses on the history of the different medical institutions on Long Island, with Plum Island and with Cold Spring Harbor and those types of things. And there's a long history of these connections, and you want to believe in the best of people. And like I've said many times, I mean, I went to a school like John's dad went to, like the smartest kids you'll ever meet from, really smart families. And I don't know how people are caught up at it at this point. I mean, I'm just literally sitting around waiting for somebody to be like, this is out of control, and we have to, but again, you talk about these societies, and whether it's an omerta or a sworn oath, a brotherhood. I mean, I do think those things are, I think they're very smart about who they pick, and they get the people that are, true believers in those type things, that really believe in those things. But, I'm at the point where, I'm just like scared for my family and for my community. And I have been for a long time. I just, hope there's something that we can do. I mean, I know George is trying to give tips to Donald Trump as far as how to, suss out this Matt Pottinger and Virginia Benassi. I'm hopeful it works, but, I feel like we've been talking about these characters for a long time. So, I'll just like try to stay positive and keep learning more and more, and make the network more filled in and easier to understand. But there's a lot of parts of it that are just really hard to accept, that people can be that dark.
It is hard. I want to say one thing about what you just said about George's work, and that is, when we all started together a couple years ago, that was before the pandemic, or the whatever you want to call it, and we were trying to investigate what was behind it at the beginning of the event. And we were looking into Italy, and specifically Milan. And from there, we started looking at names, and a lot of ink was spilled, a lot of video time spent, and a lot of in litigation incurred as a result of looking into the one or more members of a family by the name of Benassi, Benassi. And one of the people, because I was part of the research on that, and I remember finding Virginia Benassi, and tossing that name along with a few others like Pietro into the research pool. And George really ran with it, and I'm glad he did, because I still don't have any evidence that such a person really exists. And I think he's absolutely right in suggesting to Donald Trump to start, unfolding, uncovering what is, to pull that string. Just say, okay, is there or is there not really a Virginia? Will the real Virginia Banassy please stand up? You know, and if nobody shows up, then I think we've got a serious investigation underway, and I think George is right about that. So this is one of the big issues that has stalled our investigation over the past couple of years. Has been fighting, between that CNN guy and George, and just a whole lot of spinning of wheels and time. That there was a lady by the name of Matcha, I think, Banassy, and she was objecting to being outed or doxxed or something like that. And I don't think she's relevant. I think the important question is that this entity called Virginia Banassy, that I'm baffled. I mean, how could they have sent all of these emails to this Virginia Banassy, who was supposedly screening, the applications for using certain medications, and nobody can show me a picture of this person. I think it's a good lead. I think that George is right, and that President Trump, or ex-President Trump, if you will, would do very well to really dig into that. And that's my comment.
If you go out to the HIV meetings or AIDS meetings over the last 10 or 15 years, you can find org charts from events that happened in Switzerland and elsewhere. And I found several times a name Virginia Banassy on there, but you know what? There's hundreds of names. Mm-hmm. I don't see any reason why that name would, be any more suspicious than anything else.
It's just that you can't find a person that actually identifies themselves and says, "Hey, that's me. I'm her."
Well, sometimes someone just isn't quite, have that much of a footprint. It happens.
Maybe she's shy. Huh?
She could have been someone that changed their name. Could have been someone that took their, their parents got married. They was a name change there. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Things are right though. I think this is a lead that should be followed. That's just my opinion, Mark.
The other thing that I think on it too was that because I remember finding her name also, and the document I found it on was the WHO R&D blueprint, which is the document. The sequence of events was we had learned about Sina Bavari being the head of Fort Detrick, and they had shut down the highest level biosecurity laboratory in the United States. And so we're like, well, who's the director of it? And I didn't know any of these characters. George did know some historical information on him, but that's where we got the name. She was one of like the 12 authors of that WHO R&D blueprint. And, so I do think that she would have a footprint. I can see where it's possible, but it does seem like that is a weakness in the fact that she was, this key advisor. She was the person receiving the bids on the different proposals from the medical companies, the pharmacy companies, but again, it's like it's hard. Like in retrospect, I feel like we've learned so much more now because as I was talking about Mark the other day, like, one of the guys that was on the national security team was named Peter Navarro, and Peter Navarro was somebody that hired Stephen Hatfill as his medical advisor, and Hatfill was in a position where he was, advising in this corona outbreak, and of course he was mentored by somebody named William Patrick III. And William Patrick III has this long history of being one of the key advisors in doing chemical and biological warfare investigations for the U.S. military, but also for our NIH and whatnot. But again, and this is stuff that Mark and I have got into, his very first job was in Terre Haute, Indiana at Commercial Solvents Corporation. So it comes full circle. That's a huge topic because if you know what Commercial Solvents Corporation is, the founder of that corporation is the George Washington of Israel. It's Chaim Weizmann. He was the first president of the nation of Israel in 1948. So you're talking about somebody that was a political leader, but his real background is in fermentation and in explosives.
Oh boy, I'm glad you brought up that one. Yeah, so in Terre Haute, Indiana, there was a company that was, according to the Wikipedia page, started called Commercial Solvents in 1918, 1919 or so. Started in Terre Haute, Indiana, and they made things like butane, some other types of alcohols and solvents and cleaners. If you dig in, you'll actually find they also made penicillin. They also made various types of some medication during the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and eventually they were sold to like International Mineral and something Chemical, which became IMG Corp or whatever. It's 1975. So the official narrative of this company in Terre Haute is that it was started in 1918 by, I always mispronounce his name, Chaim Weizmann.
I don't know how to say it. It was.
I think it's one of those like Chaim.
So I'm just going to say Weizmann. I'm just going to say Weizmann. All right.
Like L'chaim, you know.
I'm just going to say Weizmann. It was started in 1918. So I started digging in. Okay, and this is okay. This is going to be a bombshell, guys. Okay, this is going to really get you. I can't even believe that we stumble on this stuff, and I have David to thank for getting the ball rolling here, and we've just been sharing ideas with each other. Weizmann started a company in Manhattan around 1920, I think, called Commercial Solvents Corporation. The very first thing that he did was he bought a company in Terre Haute to do the work. And that company was called Majestic Distilleries. All right. Chaim Weizmann was a huge part of raising funds and support for the nation of Israel in the United States and Canada. He actually was in North America with Einstein in 1921, and he traveled across Canada trying to raise awareness and money for his to support Israel. The same year that he started this company, Commercial Solvents, in Manhattan, that the first thing they did was they bought Majestic Distilleries in Terre Haute. Okay, follow me? Now, on this trip, Weizmann was in Canada. The whole time, he spends on the train with Mr. Bronfman, who's also a Zionist, saying, you know what you should do is you should invest in this solvents company. Now consider this. The Bronfmans, who are bootlegging, were encouraged to invest by Weizmann in a solvents company that was the previous 60 years a whiskey distillery in Indiana. And 2 years after they were founded, they were immediately returning a profit of $200,000 a quarter. I think Commercial Solvents was purchased and was actually manufacturing liquors in the United States of America. They were immediately shipped on the Wabash River. It was a 4-hour drive from Chicago. All this Hollywood nonsense about, stuff coming in from Canada is baloney. It was made in the United States. Weizmann, working with Brandeis, had the inside track on exactly when Prohibition was going to start, which was 1918. They purchased chemical companies and continued to manufacture spirits in the United States of America. And they said, they were making cool butane using Weizmann's patents. Baloney. They were making money hand over fist to support whatever other, whether savings, whether it was commercial interests. One of Weizmann's best friends back at that time, allies, Alexander Sachs, the great uncle of Bill Barr. Alexander Sachs, the same guy that carried the Einstein and Lassard letter to FDR to get the Manhattan Project started. The same guy, Alexander Sachs, who's the first economist of the New Deal. Alexander Sachs, who came in from England, who I think was actually more of an English subject. Matter of fact, he was knighted as a British subject after his death, than really an Israel Zionist supporter. But whatever. Oh yeah, one of his classmates in the debate club at Columbia was Herman John Mueller. They were that connected. So again, perhaps I'm getting over my skis here. It's really hard to start a company and immediately go to $200,000 a quarter profit. Commercial Solvents, which was actually just built, as Dave helped me identify, only several blocks away from the Vigo factory that made anthrax for World War II and was one of the hubs of biowarfare, where the Colonel William Patrick III was. I think that was the name.
Yep.
I think they found distilleries in the United States of America, rebranded them as chemical solvents companies. And all of this Hollywood stuff about bootlegging and the little Model Ts, with their, the one barrel of alcohol in the back. I think that's all bull. I have just completely flipped the switch. They were making money hand over fist. It even makes me wonder if they pushed prohibition just to get a monopoly on alcohol. It would be freaking brilliant. Think of how smart that would be. Oh, we really should make alcohol illegal 6 months after we buy all these distilleries and call them solvent companies. This is how it works, John. And I'm telling you what, this is how, Dave and I, we had good juju over the last couple of days, and put this together. And I'll bet you if we dug, we'll find a whole lot more.
Well, I just would add that from my own experience, alcohol is a very effective solvent. So
it's not that far away. If you can make alcohol, you can make a solvent, and vice versa.
It'll fry your brain, and And anyway, go ahead, David. Let's carry on from there. I still like the Kevin Costner movie a whole lot, and I'm still sticking to my my Tommy gun on that one.
Sorry to be a myth buster. Hey, you can believe Hollywood's got cool stories, but you know what? Sometimes reality is even cooler.
I'll tell you one real story, just because it's one of my stories is from my family. My grandfather told me when I was he just told me for the fun of telling me that they used to ride the train up to Montreal during Prohibition, and they would buy liquor, and they would buy bottles of liquor, and then they would put the bottles of liquor in the water cooler. There's these train cars apparently had water coolers on them at the time, and they would tie a string to that with a toothpick on the end of the string, so that when they crossed the border and they were safe, they could go and retrieve the whiskey out of the water cooler. And my grandfather, in other words, was one of the mules for the Bronfmans, at least on one or two occasions. And with his parents having been in the liquor business, it's believable. So while I love your theory, I also think that it's also true that they were bringing it in from Canada.
Well,
he had to bring in some to sustain the narrative, but yeah.
Well, I think that, the other thing that's the intrigue with this is that Joe Kennedy, JFK's dad, was also one of the, rum runner guys with his connections to the Scotch. And, he supposedly had these hits put out on him by the Purple Gang in Detroit. And then they were called off by Sam Giancana and Johnny Roselli and, all the characters that seem to come back for the JM Wave and for the Operation Mongoose later. But Detroit has the folklore. We have the the Detroit River and the sliding the booze across the ice into the blind pigs. I mean, those are great stories for Detroit. But what the other liquor company that I of course always have to harp on is Schenley's, because Schenley's was originally in Paducah, Kentucky, which is where they set up the, one of the big nuclear facilities. But that was that was the Burnham family that originally owned that. And that Burnham is the same Burnham that's in Drexel, Burnham, and Lambert, which later becomes the company that not only Michael Milken, is famous for sort of being the junk bond king of the world at Drexel, Burnham, Lambert, but the Burnham part was originally staked by the Burnham whiskey from Kentucky. And then, of course, you then get into Louis Rosenthal buying Schenley Liquors. Louis Rosenthal is the guy that was, buddy with Roy Cohn, that called him, commander or whatever, like lieutenant commander. And they did all the sex blackmail for Meyer Lansky, all the sex parties at the Plaza Hotel. They also did the Del Chorro Hotel out in La Jolla, where our buddy Leo Slazard ends up living in one of the bungalows later. But the Drexel Lambert story is also intriguing because Michael Milken, after he, goes away for his, horrible behavior of selling junk bonds and, bankrupting Resorts International. Oh my gosh, the Resorts is bankrupted. Trump pardons him, right? And then what does he get into? Oh, now I'm running the Milken Institute at George Washington University. And who am I bringing in to make medicine sexy? I'm bringing in Rick Bright and Peggy Hamburg. And Fauci. That's who I'm bringing in to, get our drugs sexy, because I lost my trading licenses, and my understudy named Leon Black, whose dad was Eli Black, that was the head of the United Fruit Company, which didn't we have a lot of syphilis tests in Guatemala that United Fruit Company sort of did banana wars there? I think it was. But Eli Black, he goes out the 44th floor window of the Pan Am building and then splats onto Broadway, or I'm sorry, onto Park Avenue, right by the Grand Central Station. Well, his son, is Leon Black, that takes over Apollo. Oh my gosh, Apollo! Aren't they the ones that just bought like AOL? I mean, haven't we been talking about Time Warner and AOL? And the guy that founded AOL, the Meinster or whatever, he's the what do they call it? A burger in Germany, where if your family is the Huxt family from IG Farben, right? Isn't that the same guy that took his Huxt money and plowed it back into AOL? And then Leon Black, his dad died sadly, but who took over United Fruit Company after that? I'm pretty sure it was Max Fisher, the guy from Franklin, Michigan, that was supposedly the understudy of Julius Klein. And wasn't Julius Klein the one that worked with William Wiseman that trained William Stevenson, the guy that was Bill Donovan sidekick, Wild Bill and Big Bill and Little Bill, and set up the whole British Security Council for the SOE and the OSS? I'm pretty sure that's all the same. And then, of course, we've got who was the other guy that was working with Wiseman, right? So you got Wiseman, the Kuhn and Loeb banker that's running this intelligence operation for the Warburgs. And then you've got our buddies Thomas Masaryk and Edward Benish. And, of course, Edward Benish's grandniece is my mom's childhood friend in Bloomington. And his dad, Vlakoff Benish, he ends up, he was a understudy for what's his name at Princeton with Einstein. Thomas Kemeny, was that his name? The guy that wrote Basic.
Yeah. His team wrote Basic, but yeah.
So he worked in his group at Princeton before he moved to Indiana, right in the same neighborhood as Herman Muller. And then you've got Vlakoff's sister. Oh my gosh, she married Zbigniew Brzezinski, right? Didn't he kind of organize all of the Operation Eagle Claw and all this stuff in Iran? Like, wasn't the kind of Iran-Contra sort of a Brzezinski plan? I feel like he got screwed, though, because he was supposed to get a professorship at Harvard that Henry Kissinger ended up getting. So he ended up going to Columbia instead, and then he, had Madeleine Albright as a student and people like that at Columbia. But I think it worked out okay in the end. But it does seem like there's a lot of the same people over and over again. And again, and I wonder why I never got like a birthday card from any of the Warburgs or Rothschilds or whatever. It seems like they're literally everywhere around my family.
Well, I think you made a good point there, Dave.
I get it. Understand it. I got lost in the mail somewhere.
Oh my! I'm so delighted that you two are working together. You've got a show coming up that you have recorded. Do you intend to produce that one, Mark?
Yeah, I'd like to produce it as soon as possible. You know how it is. We had a good chat, and then I dug into a few things, and then, 10 hours later, it's like, whoa, like the Bronfman thing. I hadn't really looked at this Commercial Solvents Corporation. I've looked at some of the early 1920s, World Zionist League groups, mostly Alexander Sachs, but there's other elements to it as well. And I think both of all three of us have kind of alluded to this, is that there's no shortage of corruption. I'm not sure the corruption never goes away, but they don't all necessarily have exactly the same goals. And I think that there's plenty of sabotage at that top level as well. There are, Alexander Sachs is a puzzling person, because it's like, well, really, what was his allegiance? Was he more of a British spy? Was he more of a Weizmann supporter for Israel? Or what was he? What was his allegiance? His allegiance, I don't think, was to the Vatican. It's just all different. You could just go down the list of all the different groups, and I don't think they all necessarily have the same allegiances. And I think some people just want money. Some people just get involved. Oh, yeah. They're just ruthless people who want money. So there's no one person on top of all of this mess. And at the same time, our access to information is at risk. We also have the greatest access to information ever. These things are happening at the same time. So, so just all that whole network. I can't keep track of David's network diagrams either. So don't be afraid, audience. Don't be afraid, John. I always tell him, like, whoa, John, go back 4 levels of the stack here. Come on. I'm still writing stuff down, over here. But it's paying off. It's paying off. We are making progress.
The sparks fly from brain to brain, and new connections are made. It's really a wonderful process, and I enjoy it.
If I may, on the Trump thing, none of us want to see illegal search and seizures. Okay, seizure of evidence, but I'll tell you what. I've done several interviews right now related to people who have dealt with the machine, who have had, I'll just say, people in their family killed with this REMD Isavir stuff.
Yeah,
and that stuff has been more lethal than any bioweapon, if it even was a bioweapon that went off in Wuhan. That so many of the deaths have been because of treatment protocols and misdiagnosis. And I would, as unfortunate as it is that, we have law enforcement is what the state of it is right now. And I'm from a law enforcement family, so I can't get dinged for speaking negatively about it. And I never do, unless it's the certain agencies within the United States of America. I wish Trump would just say, this stuff has got to stop. We're literally killing people to paint a narrative. And he doesn't. He hasn't. He's still saying, oh, what I did was amazing. It's the most amazing stuff ever. So, I'm not extending myself. What's the point? what's the point? You, John, myself, possibly your family, David. We've lost more family members than Trump has. Where's the love letter to us? The I'm sorry. It's not coming. So screw them. Anyways, I'm looking out for you guys. I'm looking out for myself, trying to do this stuff in an above board, ethical way. And again, I don't care who it is. There should be no illegal seizure of materials or planting materials or any of that stuff. So any frustration that we have, Dave has, I has with that is not rooted in defending, the white hat. Because to me, the white hat has missed its opportunity right now. And after talking for 4 hours for someone who saw their husband, get killed with this stuff and was strapped down in a bed, given several rounds of morphine every day to the point where their toes were rotting off. And even if they had lived, their feet would have had to have been amputated. They were literally assassinated to make a point. That is how ugly this stuff is. I've heard stories of children not being able to say goodbye to their parents, hands on the window while the doctors have them strapped down, giving them all kinds of morphine, painkillers, other types of painkillers, the remedy, the vent, I have a whole list of stuff written down to paint these ugly narratives of therapies that work and therapies that don't work. I have not seen Trump articulate that at all. And if it wasn't for the idiocy and the madness of Sina Bavari and a guy who ran computer simulations for DTRA, this stuff never would have happened in the first place. So if the previous President Trump wants people to fight for him, I will be there. But he has got to lay this stuff out. And until then, I don't see a dime's bit of difference. I don't know about you, David. Anyways, I feel more confident believing in myself and my friends and you guys than I do in some person that just kept promising things that never happened. David, sorry, I had to give that rant.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I'm the same way. I mean, I look at characters like Robert Malone or Michael Callahan that are still, they've got the full force of the military intelligence trying to make them into these, heroic roles or, priming Malone to be the next Fauci and he's going to be the good guy. And it's like, well, I mean, can we at least say that he worked at the Salk? I mean, did he stay at the same bungalow that Leo Slazard lived in when he founded the Salk Institute?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of overlaps. And, as we know, they like to use the same programs, especially when they have this level of security clearance. They just don't make a lot of changes to it. So again, are they just, sticking it in our face and trolling us? Yes, I think they are. Mm-hmm. People that know me or listen to me know that I am not a fan of any of the people and that I have been hypercritical of Trump, and rightfully so. I think that the fact that he acquired the Meyer Lansky Resorts International assets, I joke about it, but who else, what other deals was Ivan Boesky on, besides these Resorts International with Milken? He was also on the Guinness scandal. And what was the Guinness scandal? It was when they were acquiring United Distiller. What was one of the assets in United Distiller? Commercial Solvents Corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Things are linked. And of course, Milken was a Cranbrook student and his roommate was, Max Fisher's future son-in-law that owned a shoe store in Birmingham where I grew up my whole life. There was his shoe store. So these things are all close to home. I mean, we talk about Rockefeller. The guy that is the current head of the Rockefeller Foundation is named Raj. Raj Singh, I believe, and he went to Groves High School. It's not even 2 miles from where I'm sitting right now. So you've got that. You've got our friend Jeffrey Sachs, who's supposed to be a heroic role at the Mailman Columbia School of Public Health. And we've got our buddy Peter Daszak that is teaching there. We've got Yen Pottinger, the beautiful wife of Matt Pottinger, is there. We got Mark's favorite, Ian Lipkin, who's just solving these crises and flying the world and discovering all these problems and helping. Like, they all work at the same place. And, you know, we've talked a lot about the literary club that Alexander Sachs and Herman Muller and
at Columbia.
What was Barr's dad's name? It was Simon
Pellenbar. Donald Barr's name was Simon Pellenbar. You should just went by Pellenbar, but yeah.
Pellenbar, yeah, they're all Columbia people. And then, of course, the other one that's hard because he was the great war hero was Eisenhower. Everybody forgets that Eisenhower was the president of Columbia. And we also forget that the Russian Institute, the language school or whatever, that was started by Averell Harriman. So we've got a lot of our characters that seem to funnel into Columbia. And I know John's dad did his naval training there, but I've got my sketchy one too. I've got my Uncle Willie Pauley that was at Purdue, recruited into their naval flying program with Neil Armstrong, was also a Purdue classmate of his. So, all this stuff is crazy. And of course, with Purdue now, we've talked about Terre Haute, but we didn't mention one of my least favorite characters, Mr. What's his name? The understudy of Richard Lugar is named
Obama.
Michelle and Barack Obama bought a house in Barton Hills in Ann Arbor, where my great-grandfather subdivided that. And when he died in a ditch in 1933, the person that bought the house across the street from him was Edgar Kaiser Sr. And Edgar Kaiser Sr. was running the Willow Run plant for Kaiser Fraser. But the Kaiser family is deeply tied to Bechtel. So as much as John rides the George Schultz for, I'm right there with him but more on this Kaiser side of the equation. But they're all partners. They were partners with McCone. We talked about McCone, but these guys are all in there. It's very personal. All this stuff's personal. So people that sort of make flip comments that are BS, it's very hard because I know that they're working with the PNAC and the Yale people. That's all the McChrystal and Petraeus and Eric Braverman and all this BS. But I mean, again, is somebody going to just say, wave a white flag and say, we're in too deep? It's just absurd at this point. We're just flat out lying to people. I mean, there's a lot of problems. I'm hopeful that some of this stuff will get traction, that people will see this. I mean, I know George is hopeful with Trump. I'm not a fan of Trump. I don't like his history as far as his dealings with the Pritzkers and, all this stuff with Hyatt and the Tom Barak and his history with the Fluor Company and with the Saudi Arabia. All that stuff bothers me. The Bass family, who is, again, blood related to Sid Richardson and Clint Murchison, who are deep JFK assassination characters. He is right in there with all those guys, but he also has a mouthpiece and an audience that is enormous. So as Mark alluded to, he has the ability to reach people. He can make some comments that would be very, very helpful. I hope it happens. I feel like he's had a lot of chances.
Yeah, at some point I understand you have to be politically savvy. You can't just do everything exactly when you want. But at some point, it's like, okay, you had 4-year administration. It's been 2 years since. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to have to say some uncomfortable things. And what happened? What? You got a tax break for a little while? I don't know. It hasn't ended well. The U.S. is not in a good state right now. It wasn't, I think we're just realizing how bad it was. Probably as of 20-something years ago. Look, 20-something years ago, the two most impressive structures in the United States of America were blown to bits, and nobody went to jail. killed 2,000 people. Nobody went to jail, and it's still effectively illegal to talk about why it happened. So it's not like things just got bad, guys. Things have been pretty bad. We're just realizing that right now. Or just that hopefully more people are accepting it. But I'm feeling optimistic because I've been making some good friends lately. And I think people working together with the right attitude, staying positive, being constructive, and continuing to collect, archive, organize the history, and knowing that it's not just about finding the corruption, it's also about being part of setting a model and how we do it. I'm feeling actually more optimistic than ever before, because I feel more in control, more at peace than ever before. But it is definitely a stunning, magnificent pile of odorous stink that we are looking at. But it can be recovered.
Well, gentlemen, I think that's about enough for tonight. I would like to put a cherry on top of all of these great comments in some way, but I don't think I can. I will just say about Trump is it's like we're all in the British Navy now. You have to choose the lesser of two evils, and that, that's
I love that line.
What else can you do? I mean, if I had a choice, I'd take it. If there was a third party, if there was somebody, that was it. But this is where we started the show tonight. The problem is the media. There is no free media in this country or anywhere in the world that I'm aware of. And without free media, all the rest of the promises of our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence are easily set aside because the American people we don't have the possibility of seeing what's really going on behind the scenes, and the people that masquerade as journalists, such as people like that Vanderbilt heir on CNN. What's his name with the white hair? Anyway, these people that Wolf Blitzer and all with his green screen and all these people, they're not journalists. They're masquerading as journalists, and which does bring me to President Trump, because I do think President Trump is an actor. He's been an actor for a long time, but he's also an investor and a person who knows the real ins and outs of real estate in New York. I think he's somebody that has acknowledged for a long time that there is a mafia, and if you don't do business with it, you really can't get anywhere, especially not in New York real estate. And so, people have made choices to compromise their morals in order to make a living. And, when you're growing up in an area like David has described, where it seems like all the intellectual power of these, really great institutions is going at some point into the funnel of these darker side institutions but the people that are doing the day-to-day work either don't know or have trained their own minds to ignore the dark side. And that's where the challenge is to can these people now look at the pain that David suffers with when he recognizes the fear. He's got real fear for his family. And I think all of us should have a great deal of fear, as well as respect for the power that there is behind the scenes. Although I wish I could be more specific than to just say, the powers that should not be, the PTSNB. That's the last thing I can offer tonight is that. Well, I would also agree with you, Mark, that there are divisions and competing powers, a kind of a Game of Thrones going on, and that back and forth is real. And the Biden people are really at war with the Trump people. And, going back to the characters like, in World War II time, the Dulles people were at war with the Roosevelt people. And, the Dulles people were doing business with the Germans. The Roosevelt people wanted to defeat the Germans and were willing to do business with the Soviets in order to do that. And the tension between the Dulles people, the Republican establishment people with the Homburg hats, and the the bankers, and the Roosevelt, the New Deal people that we've talked about, was also, I mean, almost at cutthroat levels, and so those divisions, I've read from Carl Oglesby's book about the Yankee and Cowboy War with the Western Southwestern money against the Northeastern money, and these things are real. But there's also this overriding thing that is the empire from the ancient money piled from way back that has funded and created all of this banking system in the first place. So ultimately, in my opinion, we still have not only to make a choice between the two weevils, but we've also got to look behind, the whole setup that is forcing us to make this really unfortunate choice, because I personally do not want to be in the British Navy. And that's the last thing I've got for tonight, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, John. I don't want to be a Habsburg either. I'll have to throw that out there for an old one. I'm an anti-Habsburg person.
All right. More power to you. Anti-Habsburg forever. Good night, everybody.